Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of Crystal, Kyle, and Friends. There is no friend today. It is Crystal and Kyle, and it is our debate breakdown.
I believe Doug Burgum is our friend today.
Asa Hutchinson, too.
Yes.
All the top-tier candidates, I would say.
That's right.
So, first of all, before we even get started, let me just say, I am shocked because I watched the whole debate and live tweeted it, and then I had to re-watch it to get my, timestamps for the clips to show everybody.
Yes.
And this is actually a tradition for all the debates. The whole time I've been doing YouTube, I watched the debates twice, so I consider myself the foremost expert on the debates, obviously. I mean, I get the final say. My opinion's number one because I watched it more than anybody in the world. Nobody in the world watched it twice except me.
But the counterpoint to that is that, no one else watched the debate that way. So, you're not getting the true experience of the average consumer of the debate if you, watch it again and take notes. It's more true to the experience that the average voter has if you just watch it once, sort of half distracted, let it wash over you and shake it up and see who you think came out on top.
Not buying it. I'm the expert. Sorry. More information is not worse. More information is better. Anyway, so I'm shot. I'm hopped up on caffeine and it's already wearing off. I'll say that much.
Your commitment to the craft is commendable, babe.
I'm trying. So, by the way, before we actually get into it, everybody do us a big favor. This is a special edition of Crystal, Kyle, and Friends. This is not in any way, shape, or form going to be paywalled. Everybody's going to get to see all the clips from this episode. But it's not like this every week. And if you guys aren't signed up on Substack, you're missing a lot of great stuff every week. So if you sign up on Substack for $5 a month, you get the video of every interview, which is what we usually do, or debate, which is what we usually do. And you get it a day early. And everybody else can sign up for free on Substack and get the free audio version as a podcast a day later, usually on Saturdays. But like I said, today's a special day. No paywall. It's all just me and you doing the debate breakdown. We got some phenomenal clips for you guys.
Yeah.
And there's going to be probably a decent amount of disagreement today, too.
Yeah, we didn't have the same take on this debate at all. No, we were arguing about it in real time, and then you were continuing to argue in your head after I went to sleep and you watched it again. So, and also I do want to say, preview for next week, we've got a really interesting guest on, Sohrab Ahmari, who is a right-wing populist, but his economics are basically social democrat. He just wrote a book. We had him on Breaking Points, and there were some little points of disagreement that I wanted to fully flesh out with Kyle as well. So that'll be a really good one. So make sure you guys sign up so you can get that first in complete form.
I would be shocked if that didn't turn into a debate.
Oh, it's definitely going to be a debate.
Because I'm not buying the right-wing populist thing. It's how are you voting? What lines are you voting? If you're voting on the social issues, don't tell me you're a populist and that you prioritize economics. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day.
Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be good.
All right, so first let's do our general debate breakdown.
Yeah.
You winners, losers, however you want to categorize it. The first few things I'll say is the debate opened up, Fox News hosted it. It opened up with them playing that song, Rich Men North of Richmond. And I thought that was the cringiest thing I'd ever seen in my life. Talk about trying to wave ride. Oh, wow, this thing has been number one on iTunes for 2 minutes. And all of a sudden, since it's political, they're like, is this man right? I don't even know what the question was that they asked. Just they wanted an excuse to play the stupid video.
Well, and it wasn't just that. That was the eighth element in a question that took 5 minutes to build up. That ultimately amounted to this very softball, Bidenomics, am I right? I thought their answers also were kind of revealing of the current state of the Republican Party, because any previous thought that there was going to be some break with economic orthodoxy, or to your point about the populist right on economics, every single one of them just sounded like Paul Ryan.
So
the debt and the debt, and there were just all the points of disagreement were on who would be better at cutting the debt. So it was a real throwback on, and that was most of the economic section was around that first question. It was all just deficit fear mongering.
Yeah, basically the first three candidates who said anything, the first three answers, it was big government bad, government spending too much money, and oh my God, the debt, oh my God, the debt. In fact, the first hit on Trump was Haley saying, Trump has added $8 trillion to the debt.
Right.
So, again, watching that, you're are we in 2012? Are we in 2008? Are we in 2004? Are we in 2010? It's totally not getting the moment in terms of the mood of the country. This is just stupid GOP orthodoxy. They only asked one real question, in my opinion, all night. And it was the climate change one, where they brought in some young kid from some Republican organization, and he was this is a big issue for our generation. What say you? And we have the video of that later on. We can get to that. But that was the only good question, I think, in my opinion. And to me,
I mean, they had to ask some Trump questions. And I do think, even though, I'm more interested in the policy, I do think because so much of the Republican Party is defined by how they feel about Donald Trump and how sycophantic they're willing to be towards Donald Trump. I think, having, you have to ask those questions and get people to display where they are on the yes Trump, no Trump sort of Trump spectrum.
Yeah, I agree. I guess the point I'm making is the one real substantive policy question was more on climate change, and then that was like everything else was.
Which
I
ended up being revealing, and that'll be interesting.
Very revealing. Again, we'll show that video a little later. But overall though, the big winner of the night, Democrats. Because I walked away going, holy cow, these people are out of their mind. Out of every one of them. It's like there was no. Like, you return to one person and go, I think they're the most reasonable as somebody on the left. I mean, maybe you could say Christie for at least trying to fight a little bit on, hey, 91 criminal charges is kind of a bad thing. Like, but even he sometimes sort of like soft pedaled it a touch.
He did.
I think the big winner of the night is Democrats. Here's what was not mentioned. And this is one of the reasons why I say the big winner of the night was Democrats. Minimum wage, not mentioned. Healthcare, not mentioned. Corruption, not mentioned. Poverty, not mentioned. Social Security, not mentioned. Unions, not mentioned, other than to call them, and I'm not kidding about this, the biggest problem in the country today.
Is it? And wasn't that Chris Christie?
That was Chris Christie.
Yeah.
Who said that. But also,
Mr. Resistance Liberal.
Vivek took a bunch of shots at unions as well. So, like, all those, these are like some of the most important things.
Right.
And they weren't answered. Climate change was mentioned, but only in the context of most of them being like, bah.
Yeah. Right. The best they could say is like, well, I think it's real, but I don't actually want to do anything about it. That was like the best of the answers among them. No, I mean, I have a visceral like revulsion towards almost all of them on the stage. And obviously the person who got the most attention, who was taking the most incoming, who had the like feistiest vibe was Vivek Ramaswamy. I think he's going to go up in the polls. I think you have to say he was a winner from the night. But to your point, I mean, he takes a lot of positions that are just absolutely abhorrent to the American people. I mean, he and Ron DeSantis, a bunch of them are in favor of invading Mexico, right? And,
that was a standard talking point.
Right.
They all were like, absolutely.
Yeah, so there's that. I do think the climate change denialism is a real problem, especially with young voters, and especially in terms of the future. I mean, even a majority, I was just looking at the polling, even a majority of young Republicans think that climate change is a real problem. So the fact that the Republican Party is so adamantly against it, and the biggest energy in the Republican Party is around like the Vivek line of the, climate change hoax, et cetera, I think that's a real problem for them. Obviously, the fact that they're a mess on Trump and January 6th. Chris Christie and Asa Hutchinson, even walking out on stage, they both got booed because of their opposition to Trump and desire to move beyond Trump. So it shows you again, like that's going to continue to be an issue in terms of, moving beyond him, in terms of appealing to normal Americans. Obviously, the abortion part is a real problem for Republicans as well. So, but with Vivek specifically, I mean, he takes all sorts of very extreme positions that I think are going to help him in terms of a Republican primary. And if he was the nominee, which I think is very, very low likelihood, unless something happens to Trump or he's in prison or whatever, if he were to be the nominee, it'd be a huge problem for him in a general election, all kinds of things that he said.
So coming into the debate, I predicted that top tier, people who were most likely to do well, I said I think it's Pence and Christie. I think now, having watched the debate twice, both of them gave a mid performance.
Yeah.
So I'll give you my overall breakdown here, and then you can respond to it. So right off the bat, the people who I think did the best, in my opinion, maybe that's a little bit of a different answer than who won the debate, if you want to define it as who went up in the polls. But in my opinion, the people who did the best, I actually think Ron DeSantis did the best, and Nikki Haley really surprised me. Because, I mean, the bar was under the basement for her, in my opinion. She has zero charisma. I thought there's no way. No, it turned out she actually delivered what I thought was a pretty feisty performance, pretty aggressive performance. I think she walked the line well between being a psycho far-right winger and also moderating herself just enough to give herself a prayer if she were to somehow magically get to a general election. Your biggest losers, not even a conversation. Asa Hutchinson was asleep. Doug Burgum was asleep. Asa's eye popped in the middle of the debate where it was bloodshot red. Burgum was high as balls on Percocet the entire night because he had just torn his Achilles, and you could kind of tell. Homie whipped out his pocket Constitution. He didn't know where he was.
I actually thought the pocket Constitution was his best moment.
You thought it was charming?
Well,
it's kind of charming.
It was just like, yeah.
They're adorable. Look, they're adorable. I mean, they lost miserably.
Very 1990s.
They lost miserably, but they are adorable. They're living in 1989, and they think like, if I say I'm principled in favor of small government when asked about abortion, then people will like that.
Yeah, I probably hated them the least of everybody.
Yeah, they're just adorable grandpa. They don't know what they're doing. I mean, they're in way over their heads. Let's be serious. They're in way over. I mean, all these people are, but they're definitely in way over their heads.
Yeah.
So anyway, my full breakdown. Ramaswamy, I think he is going to get a big bump in the polls, so I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, everybody's really high on him right now. I'm not as high on him because he came out really hard and aggressive and did well for the first half of the debate. But then the second half of the debate, I really think that he got put in his place. I really think he fell off hard. I think a lot of the counterattacks in the second half of the debate landed on him. Chris Christie landed a good line on him about ChatGPT that the audience reacted to. I think he lost that Ukraine debate easily. He was booed when he said that the climate change agenda is a hoax. So, yes, he got the most attention and there was the most noise around him, and I think he is going to go up in the polls. But I think that's largely fake support. I think all the people who were liking Vivek in that night are actually going to vote for Trump because his whole thing was, I'm going to burrow myself inside Trump's anus.
Well, and this is where it depends on how you're looking at this debate. I mean, if you're looking at it from the standpoint of like, who's got a shot to win the Republican nomination, the answer is like Trump's the big winner because none of these people are likely to directly supplant him. I think the only lane to pursue is to be the top Trump alternative so that if he ends up in prison or something else happens that pushes him out of the race, you are the number one choice. And from that perspective, I don't think there's any doubt that Vivek did the most for himself in terms of positioning himself to be the top Trump alternative. And, I think it's gross, the amount of Trump ass-kissing that he does, which, by the way, is new. He's shifted very much in terms of how he talks about and feels about Trump. But he recognized this is the lane that you should occupy to give yourself the best shot to be the standby candidate in case something happens to Trump. And so, yeah, the fact that, look, he understood the mission, he had that right, like, feisty vibes, and his fellow competitors really elevated him by going after him so much and giving him so much oxygen. This is a guy that still has very low name recognition, or did in the Republican primary. So for him to come out of the gates in the first Republican presidential debate as like the focus of everyone's attention, I think is very elevating for him. And this is where we have a big disagreement. And even though I don't think Ron DeSantis had a bad debate, I thought some of his answers were like weaselly and sort of obviously like politician-y, trying to split the difference, but I thought he did fine. But the very fact that you had Vivek really stealing his thunder, and even people like, I agree with you, I think Nikki Haley like vastly exceeded expectations, is going to have a moment with the donor class, whatever, that you have anyone out there competing with him when he needs to totally consolidate and be the guy. I think it's a disaster for him. I think he likely goes down in the polls. And so overall, even though his performance was like fine and solid, I think he's a big loser from the night.
Yeah, I could not disagree with that more. He didn't get hit once. Now, for whatever you want to say about how, he used to be really high up in the polls and now he's come down, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, he's still a pretty solid number 2 in all the national polls. And nobody up there laid a glove on him. And I think that's actually a massive benefit in his favor. Again, we don't agree on Vivek because I think he got his ass kicked the second half of the debate, and I think that will be...
I don't really agree with that.
I understand that, but that's going to be our core disagreement.
Yeah.
But to go back to DeSantis for a second, he didn't get hit once, and then every time he had some sort of line where he got a little bit of space to be free, he got massive crowd reaction. I mean, he hit the lockdowns and the deep state and Fauci, crowd erupted. He hit Soros-funded DAs, crowd erupted. I think he navigated this question well when asked if Mike Pence did the right thing on January 6th.
Yeah.
He basically dodged it once or twice, and then finally he was like, look, I've got no beef with Mike Pence. You did the right thing. But then he immediately pivoted to, but why are we talking about this? We need to focus on the issues, and the Democrats want us to focus on this, so I'm not going to focus on this. I think he actually handled that pretty well. He said he wants to kill people at the Mexican border, which is abhorrent, but that got a big crowd reaction. He said we should invade Mexico with special forces to kill the drug cartels. Big reaction. So when I look at DeSantis, I saw a guy who was like put together, confident, got his stuff out, and then nobody laid a glove on him.
Yeah, but nobody laid a glove on like Asa Hutchinson either.
See,
why? Because he was irrelevant.
Reject that comparison. I don't think DeSantis was irrelevant. You do. I don't think he was.
But here's the thing. This was after the midterm. This was the guy. And there were polls that had him beating Trump.
I know that.
And so this was his moment to try to reclaim his spot as the top Trump alternative.
I think he did.
He didn't come anywhere close to that.
Disagree.
I really believe that Vivek will now consistently pull ahead of him in terms of being number 2 to Trump in quite a number of polls. But I'll give you an example of how you and I saw it very differently. Because that answer on Trump and on Mike Pence specifically that you thought was really clever of him being like, oh, Mike did, I guess he tried to dodge it. And then when he couldn't dodge it, he was like, yeah, Mike did his job, but let's not talk about it. See, I didn't take that as being clever. I thought it was so weaselly and obviously politician-y. Like, it was really clear. He didn't want to give a direct answer. He didn't want to talk about it. He tried to like get out of it. He got caught. He had to sort of like, give some sort of a hand gesture away. And there were a number of issues like that where he didn't want to really say what he thought about abortion. The 6-week ban, he was very uncomfortable to that was another one. Ukraine, same thing. He was very like Weasley. Let me try to parse the difference. Let me pull out what my talking points were and try to roll them out. And so again, listen, I think he did fine. But, in some ways, Nikki Haley is as much a problem for him as Vivek Ramaswamy. Because Ron DeSantis' strength is one of his big strengths has been among the donor class. He had a lot of money backing him to start with, and he had the Fox News, Rupert Murdoch empire behind him. Those people have already taken a step back. They've been shopping around for potential alternatives. They were trying to make Tim Scott a thing. I don't think Tim Scott had a good debate. I don't think that he'll get a lot of juice out of any of this. But now in Nikki Haley, you have a candidate who showed some life on the stage, who has the ideological alignment with the donor class that they will like. And so I think they're going to come out, looking at her and giving her more of a shot than they would going back to Ron DeSantis, who's already, kind of fallen off.
Okay.
Yeah.
So first of all, we're having 2 separate conversations here. On the Nikki Haley point, I agree with you. She punched way above her weight. She did a much better job. I think she is going to get an influx of donor money. But to the previous question of did DeSantis have a good night? Here's why I think he had a good night. Everything I mentioned already, plus on stage, there were very clear lines. Here's the total Trump sycophant, ball coddler, beta cucks. And then here's the Trump haters. In the Trump hater column, it was Asa and Christie. In the other column, it was everybody else on that stage to varying degrees.
Yeah.
I think he was the only one who did an effective job being like, I'm not a total beta sycophant cuck, but I also don't despise the guy. And I think that's the proper lane. It's what he should have been doing originally from the beginning. Granted, it's a very hard line to walk. I think he walked it effectively last night. Now, by the way, to put a button in this conversation, there's one poll that we've seen so far.
Yeah.
Who's at the top?
Vivek.
And?
Second one's Ron DeSantis.
So basically, we're both right here. And now, I'm not denying that Vivek's numbers are going to go up, but that's also because he was relatively unknown, and now he's going to go up for coddling Trump the most. And I just feel like when your strategy is, I'm going to be incredibly beta, like, what are you really doing? You're really trying to be VP. You're really trying to be the administration. And I think that is, I just view him as the Republican version of Pete Buttigieg. That's how I view him. And so that's why I'm hostile to him. I think he also comes across, you were saying DeSantis comes across politician-y. I think Vivek comes across super politician-y.
Pete, though, what did he end up as? He ended up as like the top Biden alternative in that lane. And that's exactly what Vivek is aiming for. Vivek does not have a plan to supplant Trump, right?
I agree, yeah. That's my criticism
Ron
of him
DeSantis deluded himself into thinking maybe he could directly take on Trump and supplant him. I don't think that is feasible. I don't think it's possible. I think their best strategy is, unfortunately, disgustingly, to coddle Trump's balls, as you put it.
Yeah, I don't agree.
And that when you have a Republican base that still really likes Donald Trump, still has total affection for him, still thinks he won the election, what they see as beta is when you are like, talking about January 6th, the way Chris Christie does, right? That's what they see as beta. They see that as like cucking yourself to the liberals or the mainstream media. They see the way that Vivek positioned himself with these like divisive, unapologetic stances as being very dominant, very alpha,
it's embarrassing. Look, 91 criminal charges, that's not something you could just brush aside like the Republican primary voters are trying to do.
You and I think that, but we're not Republican primary voters. And they have a very different view of
What about independents? What about moderates? What about center-right people?
You're talking about something different. We are talking about the general election, right? Yeah, and the people who are never Trump, they're going to love Chris Christie, and it's like freaking 6% of the vote, and he's already got him locked up.
I don't think the copycat energy, and this is a bold statement, but I don't think the copycat energy will ever work, ever. Like, that's my beef with it, is that in the same way that like Beto O'Rourke was trying to copy Barack Obama in the Democratic primary. It's like you flamed out like a loser because you're a loser.
Yeah,
and I get that from Vivek.
But to use the Pete analogy again, like where is Pete? Pete's in the administration.
And
Pete is still positioning himself like he's going to run for president.
But I agree. This is kind of my point about Vivek.
Yeah, so
which is weak beta cuck shit.
Yeah, but that positions him like he's still in the game. Pete got what he wanted, right? I mean, sure, he wants to ultimately
second fiddle.
Ultimately, he wants to be president of the United States, but he is still in a position of power. He kept himself, like the Democratic base loves him, et cetera, et cetera. So again, do I think any of these dudes are going to end up being president of the United States? No. Do I think they're going to be able to defeat Donald Trump? No. In terms of positioning themselves in the best possible way to either be the runner-up if Trump whatever happens, or to have a media role or an administration role in a future Republican or Trump administration, yeah, I think Vivek did the most benefit for himself in that.
So Pence was, I think, way more aggressive than I expected, and way more high energy than I expected.
Same.
But also, he still had those moments of being super duper religious. He also had those moments of being a really weaselly sounding politician. And, my biggest knock on him, he was better energy than I expected, right? But my biggest knock on him is that there was a moment where he seemed like he was having an identity crisis live on stage, where he was talking about January 6th and what he did on January 6th. And it was it's almost like he was trying to convince himself as well, along with the crowd, that like, I did the right thing. I followed my duty with the Constitution. And like, there was even a moment when the moderators tried to get away from him on that. And he's like, can I speak on that? It was very really just thirsty, needy energy. And it seemed like it was just an odd thing. But having said that, he performed a little better than I expected.
Yeah.
Just to give the overall breakdown, I think Vivek's going to go up a little bit in the polls.
Yeah.
I think Burgum and Asa are going to go, they're at like 0.2, they're going to go down to 0 or -8. Pence, I think he's just going to stay the same. I don't think it affected him one way or the other.
Yeah.
Nikki Haley, I think, is going to go up a little bit.
Same.
I think Tim Scott is going to go down a little bit.
Same.
I actually think this one might be a point of disagreement. I think Christie is going to go up a little bit in New Hampshire and the northeastern states. Because there's more moderate Republicans in those areas, and there was already a poll with Christie in second place in New Hampshire. And so I think that he stuck true to what his lane is. I think he'll actually gain a little bit of support in some northeastern states.
I don't think he had a good outing, though. Like, I don't think he...
I think it was mediocre. I mean, I think that it was hard because he's against everybody and the audience. And so almost like no matter what he does, it's going to look like he's doing bad. But he had some lines that landed. The ChatGPT line on Vivek. He had some other moments. I agree with you. It wasn't a great performance, but it was mediocre and enough for him to go up a little bit in those northeastern states.
I was excited to see Chris Christie.
Me too. I thought he would freak it, and he didn't freak it, but it was mediocre.
He felt hesitant at the beginning. Vivek successfully sort of like threw him off his game at a couple of points, and he made what I consider to be a kind of tactical error when he said that when they started booing him, the crowd started booing him, and he said, like, one of the great things about being an American is you're allowed to boo, but it doesn't change the truth.
See, I thought that was a good line.
It was a good line, but then it gave everyone permission to just boo him all the time, which is what they did, and like every response after that. So even the little bit of like CNN analysis or whatever that I saw, I was expecting them to be over the moon with Chris Christie when I was going into the debate before I saw the debate. But even they didn't find a lot that they could like fall in love with there. So I just don't think it really changes the polls for him. I think he's already got the like super hardcore anti-Trump vote locked up.
Listen,
so I kind of think it's going to be the same.
We thought that was like 3% beforehand, and he already surged to 9% in New Hampshire, and some polls number 2. So my point is, I think he's going to gain a couple points as a result of this, but only in particular regions. I mean, I don't think he has a prayer in a lot of southern states, for example. But I think in that northeast region, he might get a little bit of a bump. And the final one I have here is, and this is probably our biggest disagreement, I think DeSantis is going to go up. I think he's going to go up. So in other words, at the end of the day, the 3 biggest winners in terms of polling, I do think it'll be Vivek, even though I think he's more of a flash in the pan. I think Nikki Haley, and I think DeSantis, and everybody else was either mid, or you had, like I said, Asa and Burgum.
What do you think happens with Trump's numbers?
I do think it'll be chipped away 3, 4, or 5%, something like that. Just minuscule. Like, I don't think it actually makes a difference in terms of the race functionally. But I do think that, it was a mistake for him not to go to the debate because he is the show. He's the show guy. And you just turned the show over to all these other people.
Yeah.
And people weren't talking about. I know you did your interview with Tucker. Who cares? Like,
Right.
we were doing it. People wanted to watch the debate. They watched the debate. They'll lie about the Twitter. Oh, 80 trillion people watched it, whatever. Nonsense.
Yeah, and I mean, your fake numbers really don't make a difference. And even being on Twitter, I didn't see that, like, the clips weren't floating around that much. There was nothing that I was expecting. I mean, Trump is great at, like, you know, producing a show, and he really didn't. He didn't say anything that was that interesting.
Right.
It was kind of low energy. He had one line about Kamala that was, like, kind of funny. He dodged on Epstein. There was just not a lot there to feel any kind of way about. And Twitter is such a niche platform that you're putting yourself out of the mainstream. The fact that you chose to do it with Tucker means Fox News is not going to say a word about it. Like, they're not going to play a single word of the whole thing. And they continue to be the largest conservative news outlet. So you sort of intentionally ghettoized yourself outside of the mainstream conservative discussion. Look, again, I think he's going to be the nominee. I don't think it's going to be particularly close. But he did open a space for Republicans to imagine a party that doesn't have Donald Trump in the front.
Yes.
And that is a dangerous thing. And look, there's 1,000 headlines about Vivek Ramaswamy this morning and no talk about Trump. And I'm sure that has to drive him crazy because he wants to be the center of the show. So I wonder if this will persuade him to do the next debate because he doesn't like sharing the spotlight. And in that way, this was not good for him.
Yeah. And by the way, the debate, even though I think they're all psychos, it was fun. There was a lot of fighting. There was, Pence and Vivek were going at it aggressively. And then you had Christie and Vivek and Haley and Vivek. And there was a lot of, like, energy to it and life to it, even though they were saying crazy things. So that was good entertainment. Trump, and he was also on Newsmax recently talking to Eric Bolling, and he did some interview. I think it was on Fox News with some other host. And he was, like, complaining, like, it wasn't friendly. It wasn't nice. Nobody was smiling. Nobody was being good. Nobody was being kind to me. I didn't like it. They weren't kind to me. And it's like, that's actually a huge flaw of Trump. Like, when he does get in the mud and do the fighting, that's when it's like, oh, Trump's doing his thing. But, like, he actually doesn't want that. He doesn't want the confrontation. And I think that hurts him. And there's a perfect example of it here. He'd rather sit and play patty cakes with Tucker Carlson while everybody else is having fun debating, and it's actually interesting. And I think that hurts. Again, I don't think it matters that much, but I do think it was the wrong move. And, by the way, just final point on that. I think it should be a law that these idiots have to debate.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, Biden should have to debate Marianne and RFK.
Yeah.
And Trump should have to debate all these clowns on his side, because the idea, I'm going for the #1 job interview in the world, the most powerful position on the planet, and I don't want to do the job interview.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. Who cares what you want? Like, if you're going to get the job, you should have to, prove your mettle. Granted, a debate format is not everything, but it's something. Let me see it.
Yeah. That same poll that we referenced before from JL Partners and Daily Mail also asked a question about, like, do you think Trump made the right call on not going to the debate? And this was just among Republican primary voters, and it was like 70-some% were like, yes, we think he made the right call. But I will say, I mean, part of what people loved about Trump and, have continued to love about Trump among the people that still love him is that he typically doesn't really feel like he's trying to calculate and trying to win. You know what I mean? Like, he says the thing you're not really supposed to say. He does the thing he's not really supposed to do, et cetera, et cetera. This feels like a very calculated politician-y move in a way that is anathema to some of his image. Like, I'm going to make this, like, tactical, strategic consideration for safety and to play a prevent defense rather than going out there and smacking people around the way that the base really wants to see.
To your point, by the way, Trump polled his own audience at one of his rallies and asked if he should do the debate, and the room exploded, and they wanted him to do the debate. Okay.
Yeah.
So also, and if he were to go, 100% of them would be like, "Of course you should go." So
yeah.
I'm not that. That means nothing effectively. But here's the thing to me. I think it's weak. I think it looks weak because just imagine this, because back in 2015, 2016, this happened also. Megyn Kelly hosted one of the debates. Trump felt like, Megyn Kelly's very unfair to me, very unkind. I don't like it. I'm not going to do the next Fox debate. And he didn't. And he did some scam fake fundraiser for veterans, which, by the way, all that money went missing, and this became a whole big thing, right? But but what was amazing to me in the moment is that even though this was clearly, he's telling you this is coming from weakness. I don't want tough questions from Megyn Kelly. His own followers tried to spin it like it was macho. It's like, this is the opposite of macho. Imagine Joe Biden was like, the moderator's too mean. I'm not going to do the debate. They're too mean to me. Everybody be like, you little bitch.
Right.
That's the weakest thing I've ever heard. Trump does that in this instance. It's, I don't want to, these people are not serious. They're clowns. I don't want to talk to any of them. And it's like, no, you're just trying to protect your 45 or 50 point lead or whatever you have. And so that it is weak. it's weak. You're playing prevent defense, and you don't want to get exposed, even though all he would have to do is show up on the stage and fart, and he'd win by 40 points because no matter what he does, according to the last couple times he ran, he wins the debates.
I think he might show up for some of the later ones.
I hope he does.
Because, I
sees the headlines. Yeah, oh my God, it's about Vivek. Nobody's talking about my stupid Tucker interview.
Exactly. And I do think it was a real, even the plot, like he could have made a different decision. He could have given a different interview that at least would have given him some juice. But the interview with Tucker, I mean, effectively, I think fell flat. Had very little life to it, is getting very little coverage, even among like liberal outlets that you would think would find something to like really hate. The headlines were pretty weak. So I think there's a decent chance that he looks at this state of affairs and is like, nah, I'm going to the next one.
Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.